So thanks a lot for this friendly introduction. I'm really happy that so many of you are still here after this intensive discussion. As I heard, I'm really happy to be here and to get some of the very important and very interesting points you discuss here. And I hope that we can stay in contact in some sense. So the reason why I'm here, I thought about this because there are so many people who are really in the field, in the practice, and so I come more from a theoretical context. So the reason why I'm here, I think, is maybe to to talk about a very small case research I did about the New Patrons Germany and in Germany, and it was a coincidence that Christina Licko and I met at the New Patrons workshop, online workshop for mediators in May. I think it was in May 2022. Gerrit, I think that is right, in 2022. And at the same time, I was not surprised to meet her there because of her long-time experience in participatory art projects. And as you discuss it here again and again, it's always a question, what is the mehrwert, the profit maybe if we get in exchange with this New Patrons idea. So at this online workshop in and from Berlin online, I gave a presentation on a small scale research I did in 2020 and early 2021 on the actor world, as I call it, with reference to Bruno Latour and the actor network theory on the actor world of the New Patrons. And I would also like to report today from this research, but maybe to frame it, a few words to my background first. As you heard before, I studied cultural anthropology, art history, and art education, and I have always been interested in the relations and the productive intersections between the fields of science, the field of art, and everyday practices. And one research topic that allows to combine these different social fields is that of relational art practices. I have been dealing with participatory and relational approaches in contemporary art for several years, and I would call it as a kind of multiple agent, as theorist, as field researcher, and also in some parts as engaged citizen. So as a theorist, my contribution is from the perspective of cultural anthropology and aesthetic theory. So I frame this with reference to the anthropologist Ina Maria Greveros as aesthetic anthropology. As a field researcher in the context of field work, I did on and in several relational art projects, and as engaged citizen interested in the transformations, especially of urban space and especially of my birthplace Linz on the Danube, my present residence Graz, and also of other cities where I lived and for research purposes, for example, Hamburg and London. So these are the fields I did not do research on Zagreb, but it's very interesting what I hear about this city as well, and the transformations. Also, we have to look in another way on it. So this was what I learned and what I find very interesting. So to compare and relate these different fields. Yeah, during the last years, I did research and I've written a book on this multiple agency with the title Aesthetic Alliances in Urban Space, Translational Moments in Relational Art and Anthropology, which will be published this autumn. Sorry for this short advert I do here, but I mentioned this because Christina Licko's project, No Monuments, which she realized in Graz from 2011 until 2013, and I collaborated in some parts of this project with some students of anthropology. So her project is one of the cases I discuss in this study, and the drawing at the cover of this book refers to the complex actor world of Christina's project. So I did interviews, and I always asked the interview partners, or often ask them also to make a sketch of the actor worlds of their perspective. And so this is one of the drawings I got out from my fieldwork. So the results of this research on different cases of aesthetic alliances in urban space. So I had one case in Linz, one in Graz, and one in Hamburg. The results have also guided my small-scale research then on the actor worlds of the new patrons, as I told you, which were commissioned. So this was a paid work of the new patrons who were interested in someone who looks at their projects from the outside. Yes, and then I conducted some interviews with mediators, like, for example, Gerrit Gölke, with artists. And I also was able to have a look at the minutes of conversations of concrete project processes. And of course, I studied the publications about different projects. However, I would like to emphasize the following. I have not yet conducted field research on a new patrons project on site. That was the plan, but in 2020 there was Corona, and so I was not able to do this. There were also travel restrictions from a university, and so it was just online interviews and learning about these processes through online representations and publications. In my contribution today, I would like to address one main issue of the new patrons projects, and I would say this is a main issue of all relational and participatory art projects, because they are all characterized by these highly complex actor worlds, similar to the sketch of this book. And my main question is, how is cohesion? How is cohesion created, connection created between these different parts of the actor worlds, and what role does, now referring to the new patrons idea, and what role does the mediator as one of the main actors in the new patrons actor worlds, what role does the mediator play in this process of translation work, as I would call this key activity? I will come back to this term later, process of translation work in the frame of the new patrons projects. But before I give an insight into the findings about the main translation actors, significant translation actors, or also translation tools, let me say a few words about the perspective of this study. So looking at the field of relational art projects from the epistemological position of aesthetic anthropology, the traditional triangle of work aesthetic, of production aesthetic, and of reception aesthetic has to be renegotiated. So the finished work of art loses significance. So from my perspective, depends always on the people who look at it. So the finished work of art loses significance as a self-contained unit. Rather, the focus shifts to the work process and the social context. Referring to the production aesthetic, the focus is no longer on the artist as an ingenious creator, but it is on the collaboration between many different actors involved. And from the perspective of reception aesthetics, the act of reception is less interesting as an act of distance, consideration, or observation of an artwork which was produced by an ingenious artist. And I know this is very Holzschnittartig what I say here, but what is interesting now is the act of participation of many different actors and actor groups. So I'm aware that this challenge to the classical aesthetic triad is not really new, and it is not a singular characteristic of New Patrons project, but in this context, it seems maybe so for as an analytical basis and maybe also for discussing, it seems interesting to emphasize this again, because this way of looking, this perspective demands one thing above all, to focus on relationships, on actor relationships. Whereby when I say actor here, as this thematic sketch shows, and I would like to emphasize this is not the final result, one-to-one, what I found out, but it is a kind of heuristic which should help us and me to think about the relations between the actors. So when I say actors, I mean both human actors and non-human actors. So when I say human actors, you see them here marked in yellow, and maybe you can also read what I wrote to this list of many different actors. Now, human actors is so in the inner circle. This is a term I have from an interview with an artist in such a project. She always, when she spoke about the project, she spoke about an inner circle and two other circles around. I come to this and the hierarchies later in the project. So in the inner circle, you see, for example, the patrons, of course, the artist and the mediators. So the mediator as translator, you see him or her here marked with this yellow star, also as a heuristic. Then we have not only these patrons, artists, and mediators, but we have also scientists, researchers, politicians, sponsors who are involved in these processes. Then you have the citizens of the respective districts in which the projects are going on, which the citizens who are no patrons. Then you have the public, the craftsmen, for example, who give their work to finish an artwork. For example, you have technicians who film projects. You have secretaries who have to do all the communication processes. You have administration staff. Then you have also the spectators, of course, the spectators when a work is finished, art critics who look at this art project, maybe the realized artwork, but also the process in general. You have journalists and so on. So there were a lot of human actors involved in this project, which are here marked in yellow. Then we have a lot of non-human actors. I tried to find here a structure, and I have these three main groups of non-human actors. These are, on the one hand, capital, the we-promises and we-techniques, and the aesthetic and epistemic actors. So when I talk a capital, here marked in green, I speak in the sense of Pierre Bourdieu, not only of economic capital, such as money or material property, but also of cultural capital, like, for example, education or knowledge. And I speak also of social capital, like friendships, like established social contacts or family relations. So these are all non-human actors which play an important role in these new patrons projects. And I will come to this form of capital then in my conclusion. I will come back to it in my conclusion. This is the capital of time and the capital of trust, which have proven to be very important. So in this process of building relations, making cohesion between the different actor groups, especially human actors in these processes. So the second form of non-human actors, which occur to be very important, are here marked in pink, that are the promises and techniques. So it's the politics of democracy and also the term of democracy. So this is very important in the new actor projects, and it is mentioned again and again. Also to promise that there is something like a we of citizens who are able to participate in decisions. And I speak of promise here, so yes, we can maybe discuss about it, but it's very important to promise the people that they can participate in this project. If and in which extent they can participate, that's another question, and depends on the project and so on. Then we have, for example, and this lists, when I talk here, these are not all actors, but it's the main important actors which I found out in my studies. So then we have the legal persons, like schools, for example, associations, or the new patrons. Yesterday we talked about, okay, how are they? Are they an association? Are they in GmbH and so on? So what is the legal character of the new patrons? Also, this is a very important actor in these processes. And we have a lot of rules and regulations in these processes. For example, the protocol of François Eyre. We have contracts. So in the new patrons processes, you always make this contract, which is very important as actor in making cohesion. And then we have, for example, ideas of public sphere, also ideas, all they are, so I do not speak as when I say public sphere, I mean not so we know what it is, but it's the idea that there is something like a public sphere, the idea of engaged citizens, the idea of participation. So all very important words that circulate again and again in this project, and which should do something, especially bringing the people together. Yeah, and so the third group of non-human actors are aesthetic and epistemic actors, marked here in blue, which support these we promises and which make these we promises sensual and cognitive perceptible, like, for example, spatial atmospheres, which are very important artworks, of course. Spatial atmospheres concerning the design of places, the design of images and pictures. We have speak acts and written texts, which are very important. Performances, media, also social media, and texts and images. And so in general, again, the idea or ideal of an artwork, so that this has a value. Yeah, so if we had the time now, we could think about several other additional actors, but this is just to give an impulse for talking maybe later on or discussing later on. So that's very important from project to project, is that all these actors, human and non-human, are not closed entities, but they come into being only in relation to the other actors. So they emerge in the process of doing, they emerge in the interaction in relation with the other actors. And that means this is different from project to project. What is also important, maybe it's self-evident, but I think it's good to mention it here, is that agency, so the power to act of these actors, is not distributed equally between them, but hierarchically. So there are actors who have more agency, positioned here schematically in the first circle, and those with less agency. So the fact that there are many interrelationships, ambivalences and transitions in between is also schematically sketched here. So the circles are not closed, sondern they are perforated, Also, I would like to say this is not the final result, but it's a tool for thinking about this very complex actor words. From the perspective of aesthetic anthropology, the most interesting and fundamental question is now how the relationships between these different parts of actors are shaped, and with specific consideration of the role of the aesthetic actors I showed here, and what creates cohesion where the conflicts arise. And for this activity of creating cohesion, and this is crucial also in comparison to other relational art projects, the new patrons have their own, I would say, meta actor, so namely the mediator, whom I marked here with the star in the middle, because we talk about this position also here again and again. So are there not artists who are also mediators and all these discussions? So what is the role of this figure? Yeah, in the new patrons protocol, in François Ayres' protocol, the mediator is defined in this way. It proposes that mediators establish connections between the works and the public, the possibility also to be mediators between the artists and the patron in person and beyond them, among all the players who happen to be involved. And so for me, it's always interesting also to think about translations. Translation in the French protocol, François Ayres called it acteur. So in German language, we also say acteur. In English, it's players. I don't know what word it's in Croatian, but it's interesting. So we discussed it yesterday. How can we also translate such words which were coined in the French context, which is a specific one? How can we translate them in other languages and also in other political and artistic contexts? So the mediators organize their cooperation. So I read here further about this. The mediators organize their cooperation, so between the players. They provide the necessary knowledge for the choice of the medium and the artist, as well as the skills that will allow for the production of an artwork that respects the requirements of the demand as well as the creation. So, and this fundamental activity of the mediator in the New Patrons network, the organization of cooperation, I would describe with the term translation work. And when I say translation work, so there are a lot of reasons for it. One is also because in anthropology, we always have this discussion about the anthropologist just as translator between science and the field he or she studies. So that means that we always have to do a kind of self-reflection about our own role. This is why I'm very interested in this term. Another reason is that the artist as translator was terminology which I found in the field again and again. So artists which speak from their work in participatory artworks as a kind of translation work. And then the third reason is that I've found it in this actor network theory. So Bruno Latour and Michel Collomb, when they say la traduction, they mean the creation of connectivity between the heterogeneous parts of an actor's world. And I will quote here from Michel Collomb also: translation and acknowledges the existence of differences and differences that cannot be reconciled. It nevertheless affirms that the underlying unity between different elements. Translation involves the creation of convergences and homologies by connecting different things beforehand. So that means translation is also always a kind of struggling with conflicts. Yeah, it's also interesting maybe that Bruno Latour was involved a lot in different activities of the new patrons in France. He gave lectures, published about them, and so on. So translation means the creation of cohesion between the heterogeneous parts of an actor's world. When I speak here of translation or the main work of a mediator to translate. And then the next question, as I said, I think 2 or 3 times now, is how is this translation work done. And in my research so far, I have been able to identify 4 significant translation actors or translation tools. And you can, so this is now very small, this schedule, but if you have it in mind, some of them you or all of them you also can find here. Not all actors have, I would say, are significant translation tools, but there are some of them. And the 4 I would say are very significant are capital, we promise, spatial atmospheres, and image and speech acts. Capital, again, in this understanding of Pierre Bourdieu of economic capital, social capital, and cultural moralistic capital. So, and now I would like to bring a few examples for such translation actors from my research. So the first translation tool is capital. So it's always a question so how human actors, now the yellow ones, human actors who are involved in new patrons project, how much capital, economic, social, cultural capital they could acquire in the course of their life, and that is distributed differently in line with the social distribution of power. So the question is always who can bring what kind and what amount of social, cultural, economic capital in relation to his or her positioning in the social space. With reference to cultural capital, it's, for example, one example, I bring just a few examples, is, for example, the wish or the value to learn. So this is a main motive to participate or also to stay in a new patrons project for mediators as well as for patrons and for other human participants. And I would like to quote from an interview of one example. So I'm a kind of permanent means trainee in the project. I think I can say different qualifications that you imagine come together, but in the end, it's a constant learning process. And if you learned to frame, and I come back to this later, often freiwillige Arbeit as learning process, then it's something that sticks you to the project in general. Or with reference to economic capital and the capability to trust others. I have this quote here. Big questions are who will pay for it? How sure is it that it will be implemented? So the project, the artwork, how much time have I invested? I'm on unemployment benefits, living in a difficult social environment, and volunteering against all odds that it will be implemented. And that is an ethical challenge for every mediator. We are raising great expectations while we don't have the funding yet. So this was a quote from an interview with a mediator. And the examples I bring here, I think there were a lot examples. I will not say anything to it. You can read. I hope you can read it. It's examples here. You see Gerrit Gölke. I think it was a very important project from the Sieben Künste from Pritzwalk, which was realized from or with Clegg and Goodman, for example. Yes, so the second translation actor is this we promise. So the promise of a we in the sense of an, I would say, imagined or emerging democratic community that holds out the prospect, the vision of an equal participation, of co-decision and of evaluation for the actors. So these promises take shape on the one hand through collectivizing activities such as, for example, eating together, going for a coffee, playing games, or going for a walk, or being together in a conference, celebrating, and so on. And on the other hand, through a specific wording and through specific visual practices which promise also this we. So photographs of the group have a very important role in these projects of the new patrons in Germany and also in France. Or phrases, and I found a lot of them in my data. You can read them here. Places of togetherness, be bold, be courageous, be alive and full of joy, city of common opportunities, education as connectivity, campus of urban togetherness, stimulate the joint discourse, collective ingenuity, and so on. And also maybe one quote from the interviews. We want to bring village life out of our houses and into the village with a pavilion as kitchen and meeting room. The village will get a new center, innovative village furniture on the path to it should create new occasions for social togetherness. So this promise of a we. And so the third translation tool here is the design of spatial atmospheres and its reception. So they are a strong actor for sticking people together or for keeping also for keeping them or getting them apart. Just to illustrate this, there are also a few quotes, one from a mediator and one from a patron. I've always been waiting for something like this because we have real problems here. This city is falling apart in the middle. I've always thought that culture should be brought in here and that art is the thing that can change things, for example, or we should go to regions where we can assume that the need to do something is particularly great. So not in the center of Munich, where people are doing relatively well anyway, although there would be a lot to do in the station district, but rather, for example, in the rural regions that are heavily depopulated or shrinking, where infrastructures are disappearing, identities are crumbling, and the AfD is on the rise. So this is a quote of a New Patrons Germany mediator. Yeah, and the last example of such significant translation actors or translation tools are image and speech acts. So always images, images and language and words in action via the usage of visual artifacts, the usage of words, both spoken and written words. And to illustrate this, you can again read a few quotes here from my interviews. Maybe I say here one, because it's always this question, what is art and how do people, what do people think about art? So this is a very important discussion in this New Patrons project. So art always has the reputation of being elitist. It has to be something that sheds the supposed elitism. You have to be able to identify with it, no homeland art, yet something understandable, tangible. So I come to the end now. Besides these four significant translation actors, I found that there is another one, so which is very important in the process of establishing these relations, and this is time. So time can be described as a kind of transversal form of capital, which can be identified as essential. I would like to briefly concretize this with a few examples. Projects of the new patrons, as I learned, only work through voluntary, unpaid work of engaged citizens, having free time apart from paid employment or mostly unpaid reproductive work is thus the essential precondition for participation. Mediators, employees of the new patrons in Germany now, and artists do paid work. Of course, we could discuss also about the amount of salary, but I think this is another discussion, or no, it's a main discussion. So there is paid work and there is unpaid work, and the question is how they relate to each other in the course of the projects. For all those involved, the following question appears: how can I, as engaged citizen, code or exchange the time that I spend in such projects? And this is, above all, again, a habitual question, so a question of positioning in the social space, in the sense of Pierre Bourdieu. So how did I learn to deal with my time, to estimate my time, to evaluate certain activities? Have I learned to evaluate volunteering for a society as meaningful, as morally, socially, culturally valuable? Can the time which is invested in a project be exchanged for non-monetary returns, such as I meet or make friends there, I can make interesting contacts with special people, artists, for example, I get to know relevant people, and so on. I can also improve certain skills. So this is, again, this learning question. Do I get recognition of my own person, my own action by others? Do I get symbolic capital for it, in Bourdieu's wording? Is there a possibility of creativity or creative development that fulfills me? And even if this is not, you can also do it in an unconscious sense. So when people, and this is maybe my last sentence here and my last consideration, when people spend time on these projects, how do they profit from them? And when I say profit, I don't mean this in a capitalist utilitarian sense, but with reference to the power relations of the social space. Because the resource of time and the opportunity to gain appropriate recognition for its use, be it material or symbolic, is unevenly distributed. And at the same time, some speak of time as a rare, so this is from my interview, some speak of time as a very rare, valuable commodity. They can code their invested time for a project in several ways, and others, on the other hand, have enough free time but do not find a way to recharge it. Yes, so to come to the end, and also the title of this lecture, and maybe also to a realistic outlook for the future, I would like to summarize so these considerations with a modified motto of contemporary art. Maybe you know, in Vienna we have this Sesija building, and it's a motto which is called der Zeit ihre Kunst, der Kunst ihre Freiheit, and the modification here is give art its time and give time its value in this multiple meaning of the word. Okay, thanks a lot.
I thank you, Judith, very much. Are we so tired that we don't have any questions? Yeah, Sonia has a question. And I will also have one after that.
Thanks. It's not a question, it's more like a commentary. Because when you started with this actant network theory, which is of course not just Latour's, but also Austin and Grimes and so on, and it came to me that, for example, when you come from actant theory and this differentiation between actant and actor, then we kind of see also that the whole this process also is like a process of forming a narrative, like collective narrative.
Yes.
And for example, you use the word cohesion. I often think of it in the sense of consensus. And you know how in societal circumstances, consensus, or in political too, of course, spheres can be imposed or can be come to, right? And that kind of forming consensus, forming common narrative requires time. But it also came to me that time is not just like extra out of these four tools. Sometimes time is capital. I mean, people have to work, they have certain obligations. So somehow in my conceptualization of this whole process, time is also a form of capital in the sense.
Yes.
Because people invest their time and we often talk about it. So this is, I would also think or conceptualize that as a kind of tool, you know, so how much time people invest to it. And also this distinction, I have to say, between, you know, patrons as patrons or patrons as volunteers and mediator as paid is also something that brings, you know, time. It gives time totally different quality. So I just put it as something to think about.
But this was the last sentence you did said, basically.
Yeah, I think this is very important. And I would also emphasize one thing, that it's not only actor network theory with all these different strands and the big discussions which are important for my thinking, sondern also Pierre Bourdieu, who was really, they were enemies, Latour and Bourdieu. And I think it's very interesting if we think about such processes to think the two positions together. So on the one hand, this cohesion question, translation questions, and on the other hand, so this idea of total equality, and on the other hand, this Bourdieu thinking about distinctions and real power relations. So I think I cannot think new patterns or relational artworks only with Latour, but or with the actor network theory, but I need both, and this is what I'm methodological and also theoretically struggling.
Thank you, and thank you for the lecture. It was really inspiring for me. I have just two very subjective remarks. I think I had the feeling while meditating over this this figure with a star in the center that maybe at different periods of the project, different stars may be in the center. So the starring maybe at one point the actor group of the commissioners, at some point the intermediating qualities of a mediator, and at another point of time, which is really helpful, maybe shifting to staring the artist in the middle. And as this is not fixed, but is shifting forth and back, that's maybe one quality of time, as you say, in this project. And just one other remark I had in mind is just what I thought about when you were talking about capital, we are so used I understand, of course, the notion of capital, and this is a very broad sense of how you use the notion. And I remember just an art historian researching on this Pritzwalk project you mentioned in the beginning, and she said, wow, this is a project about generosity, and that's, I think, an interesting way to reflect the notion of capital, to say it's about, of course, an accumulation of capital to have time to invest energy and fantasy in the project, and to have this capital which is not there in the beginning at the project. Different actors come together and generate maybe this capital, but I liked just as sort of a footnote to the capital that these researchers said this is one of rare projects in the art system where we rely so much on generosity of giving things away that you could not expect in the beginning. So it's most unlikely that people in precarious spaces or regions give things away just by spending something to accumulate capital. And that's one reality, maybe, how the capital you describe is brought together in the project realities of new patterns. That's at least what I fantasized about.
So to the first question or remark, so I totally agree, because I also wanted to indicate this with the schedule and the different lines you see here, that it's always in motion. But it's in motion, but at the same time, and here we have also this actor network theory, they are all equal and they are all in motion, and it always depends how they react. But the question is always, and they do also here, and there could be the artist in the middle, and maybe there is a journalist suddenly in the middle, or a politician in the middle, and the star so is moving to another place, but at the same time, this mediator in the new patterns concept is the one figure who is in the middle of all these different actors and should react on them. And this is maybe not the sense when another one is in the middle. Yeah, so it's a section point in some way, collecting all this. Yeah. Yes, and the generosity thing is also always a question of who. So here to speak with Bourdieu again, who has learned to be generous and why. So also what does he or she get back for this generosity? And we know from the theories of participation that it's a specific group of people who can be generous. And I think here we have to look, is this the same today or in other contexts? So because this participatory, it's well-educated, middle class, male, white, and so on, who have this habitus of generosity. And I think there are a lot of others, of course, but it's also, again, what agency do they have then in such projects?
Thank you. Thank you, Judith, for the lecture. I would like to ask if you could elaborate a little bit more on the non-human actor and the sense of trust. We've spoken here on time, and actually you've expanded my notion of non-human actors to think of relations, etc., because in more than human and non-human theories of trans-species or inanimate and animate objects and beings, actually to think of it as capital and social relations. So that is something complete new to me. And in that sense also to hear about your thinking behind trust being capital, economic capital in the first instance, as we have been talking a lot about paid and non-paid work in the system of new patrons.
So the question was, the second question, if non-human actors like other species are also or could also be thought as actors in these situations, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course, it's just I have never thought of non-human actors as economic capital or social relations, and that's what I said, that it expanded my notion. But also then to think about the notion of trust that you mentioned, not just time in these relations, and trust now related to capital, you know, like Marxist capital, and let's say accumulation of wealth or social capital, etc. What role trust plays between the actors, especially in this relation of paid and non-paid agents within a new patrons model.
So I think this is very important. I did not have thought about that. So maybe we could discuss that later on, and I will think about it. But yeah, I think this is important. So Bourdieu thinks Marx capital term further. So he his theory is based on the Marxist theory, but he says we should not only look at this economic capital, we should also look at other forms of capital. And I think that there are good reasons also to take this non-human multi-species questions also with this in this intersection of Latour and Bourdieu. Yes, I think so.
Sorry, my English is not very well, but can we talk besides capital? I don't like very much that word. Can we talk besides capital about use the word reward or something else?
Change, you mean? Or
maybe. I think capital brings some connotation, association that are not very. I'm not very fond of them. I don't know how the word is understood in the West world, but I have bad associations with it, and I don't find it close to the idea of new patrons. And I think other word would be more. Somebody said reward. I don't know what's the meaning in the
reward is value or
value? Yes, also value. Yes.
Yes.
And when you talk about generosity, is there other also concept or word we can talk about it? For example, public interest. Is it? Can we think of an individual that is just willing to do things in public interest? It doesn't need to be generosity. It means something you give away from you to somebody else.
Yes, of course.
But in the idea that public interest is mine and of you and of third, that is something normal, you know, natural.
Yes, but so when I think I would ask the question to you: why does someone act in public interest? Why? Is it intrinsic, and is this natural, or where does it come from? This is what interests me then. Because I think you're totally right. There are people who say, I participate because of a public interest, and others do not act in a public interest. And why is the one without evaluating it now? So from this anthropological, through this anthropological lens, for me, it's interesting. There are someone who do it and others who don't do it. And why? So why do you think that people, because I think this is a crucial question in this whole new patrons or relational or participatory or socially engaged or whatever, is this question, why are there some people, humans, who participate and spend a lot of time, and others who are not interested in.
Yes, that's. I think I can talk only about myself.
Yeah.
I cannot talk for another person. I don't know. But maybe there's also something about culture, about the that is kako se kaže, razvija njegovan in the society, you know.
What I learned.
Cultural codes, values that are promoted.
Yes.
And if you are raised in a certain cultural
yes, or social
yes,
context.
Yes.
Or if someone, for example, here that maybe the term trust is also, if I learn from the beginning of my life that when I do something, doesn't matter what it is, and someone says, yes, you did that well, and then I trust in my own acting, then I maybe spend time for such projects, because
yes.
I get again and again, I trust myself,
yes,
and I'm trusted by others.
Yes, yeah? Yes.
And if I don't grow up in such a context, and I think culture is one besides others, because
yes, only one field.
People in different geographical, whatever contexts, where you also have the one who trusts when they do something, and others who don't.
Okay,
I would like just to maybe shortly comment. I understand Masha's reaction, like really like, why is this capital now here talking about my work? And I must say, first time I read a book by Judith, and I really felt like it killed me, because this is actually a Marxist, materialistic analysis of the work we do. Because we give, when we do, when you go and work with people, you give this, we promise. You promise something, you promise ideology, and this is what we do. And people who can participate, they have to have time. So who has time, and so on. So this is, I think, it's like really being deconstructed. What are we doing? And can we cope with that? Can this analysis help us to do better our projects, maybe as a theory? I think this is what a look on the, on artistic praxis like that, a scientific gaze can maybe give you. And since, Sonia was first, and then you get it.
I just had a small remark that public interest, just like a community, is something that is constantly negotiated. So it's not like a given concept or something that comes with deus ex machina. It's something that is constantly negotiated in the society. And that's what we are talking about. Public interest, consensus, cohesion. All these actors that come into the play that you did. You have very specific network there, human actors, capital. I mean, that's what we are talking about. Now we are talking really abstractly.
I think we are here talking about should the are they privileged or privileged that they have time, and so privileged that they have education, that they can know how to talk with me or do something? Who is that?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
So a citizen is not a painter, but you are also talking about engaged citizen. So engaged citizens should be educated or involved, or there is some kind of outer force, let's say, and that force you called image or speech act, right? Yeah, everybody can, but it's not that everybody is ready to take that role. That's what I'm saying. So not any citizens feels capacitated to do that. How do we capacitate citizens to be engaged citizens and patrons? That's, I think, the gist of what you're talking about here.
Yes, and feel like maybe it's not only how should we support them to get, but also how are the social structures that some do it and others don't. So, and I think we always have to take also a look of this greater context, who is responsible for enabling some to do and others not to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm afraid a little bit that I'm the naive one in the room. I like the analysis we have seen, and the I think we need this type of rationalization of notions to understand what we are doing in the project. At the same time, I have a sympathy and understanding for Masha's feeling of being uncomfortable with capital, and that she's thinking, oh, in this project, and especially when I'm investing my time, this is not about the word of accumulating capital. Of course, we do it in a way. On the other hand, I think that's part of the dialectics of the project. It's not just a project about time; it's also a project about language, and also sort of that we're doing things that are unpopular, irrational, inefficient, and that we are doing this. This is why I related with generosity as a footnote to capital, even if I believe that you're completely right in what you're doing in your analysis. And I think that this is an important part of the inner framework and the inner narrative of what we're doing, and how spontaneously we are reacting to the unlikeliness of that things can happen. We see that there are people who have no language, who are not privileged in a project, and we think, in spite of this, and even if it's unlikely that it will come to a good end, maybe we try it, we do it, we just go into the project and start thinking, let's do it with a certain feeling of defiance, or let's go in and start doing things that maybe could never happen. So this is part of how we organize ourselves in society against the strict notions of capital and investment and efficiency, and that's part of our reality. And maybe that's a way to create another creative capital, but that's a way we should stay to it. I think to this rebellious primary idea that was in the project, do it, even if society right now in the framework you are working in is not allowing it properly, or even if it's not popular what you're doing right now. And that's part of finding our ways in the perforation work of these three circles, going forth and back, and finding the little holes in the walls where we could switch in.
Yeah, I'm just a bit confused. It's been a long day, but hearing Christina's remark, is there, a very simple question, is there a class analysis of new patrons?
A class analysis?
Yes, of people that were new patrons, that were acting as new patrons.
I wouldn't say that's a class analysis, no.
Does it exist? It's a question.
Yeah.
Because from what Christina said, it made me think that there was like a study of maybe just one part, so there isn't. Okay, it's just a question, because as I understood your remark, yeah, it would be, for me, it would be really interesting, because as I understood Christina's remark, and I think it's very important, if not crucial, it is the question of who has the time, tools to even enter into the process of, I mean, imagine like you're a mother of two, you are a working woman, you have to take your kids to the kindergarten, it's morning, you have to go to work, and you enter a bakery and you say, I need a loaf of bread. And the woman behind the counter says, please, today we have participation day, come behind the counter and bake bread with me, I will show you the process, tra-na-na. But you just need the bread and you need to get on with your life. The time is ticking, the clock is ticking. You don't have the capacity for this kind of participatory work, although maybe you are really interested in it, it would be nice, but you don't have the time. So I think that's like, sometimes people don't want to participate and don't have the time because we are living in a capitalist society where the majority of people is working in super harsh conditions.
Yes. So I think this is a main question of who participates and who does not participate. It's a question of social positioning, and the question of social positioning is always a question of accumulation of capital. So with Bourdieu spoken with Bourdieu, I think this is evident, yes. And if you say this is a class analysis, I wouldn't say it's only a class analysis. So it's more like that. But maybe I didn't think about it if I would. But I think it's very important.
If there was any analysis.
If I did it.
No. If you know there is any class analysis of new patterns, and there is no class analysis. Nobody ever wrote a book from Marx's point of view.
Okay.
I assume. I didn't see.
Okay.
I mean, it's interesting to say that Ers wrote the book that is called Art Without Capitals, and that's how the whole thing started. So maybe we should have also kind of tackle that content. Yeah.
And I think this is interesting because the new patrons, they cooperated a lot with Latour and all this actor network people who say you do not deal with these terms. And this is where I say we have to think about it from both ways. And we also have to, but so I read a lot of texts about the new patrons. I didn't find quantitative class analysis like Pierre Bourdieu's distinction. I didn't find something, but I think that would be really interesting to do this, and not only concerning who are the patrons, but also who are the mediators and who are the people who are employed for linking all those people together. Yes.
One other thing comes to my mind is the question of projects done within new patrons model in urban areas. Did anyone research the connection between these projects and gentrification processes? Because we all know that that's a big issue when we talk about art in public space, that sometimes with best intentions, it actually fosters rise of real estate and so on.
Exclusion and so on, yeah. So there is this, because there is a lot thought about this question of art and gentrification, and I quote here Elke Raut from the Urbanize Festival. They had a text which is called "Doing Nothing is No Solution," and what she thinks in this text, or what she her consideration in this text is that we should be very aware about the different groups of actors, the hierarchies, and about what we are doing. And based on this knowledge, we should also act in such districts. So it's, again, this Bourdieu also says we only can act and we only can have agency if we understand in which conditions we work. And I think this is what we should do when we work in such districts. So being aware of it and reflecting again and again what we do.
I would like to ask you, Judith, so it seems like time is one condition to participate, but time, even if, I mean, we all deal with time in one way or the other, and we all think that we don't have time, and then suddenly we have time for the things that matter. And here in your model, what do you see as a capital that can work against a lack of time? Why are people doing it? Why do some people have time and some other people don't have time, although they're like equal in the social positioning, let's say?
So all people who have time, if they are equal in the social position?
No, you have like two mothers with 2 kids. Yeah. And one is participating and the other is not.
Okay.
And so what other profit are compensating the lack of time so that people have time because they are rewarded in another way?
So I think it's, if you look, and I think this is why this term of capital is useful, because it's not only this economic, but also the social and the cultural. So if I'm educated and when I spend time on such a project and get the feeling that I did something great, and I say really the feeling that must not, that is not necessarily a rational process. So this utilitarian, I do this because then I get this back. But a lot of this we learned, and I think it's always this question: if I do it or if I do it not. It's a question of how I am positioned in the social space, and the question if I have the time or if I don't have it is also a question of this. I think so, and maybe there are people who are positioned in the same place. And one does and one does it not because of other possibilities of coding the invested time. Because I learned to code it, it's morally good, and that is something that I feel. Maybe we then have to talk about emotions and of such things.
I maybe just want to briefly mention we have mothers with 2 kids in precarious economic conditions in our projects, at least in these where I was collaborating. We also have very privileged people in these projects, so it's a broad variety of people in their social roles in the projects, and I think we have to have a certain awareness of that they are also depending on economic situations and where people are coming from. We have different types or typologies of urgency. So we have people in a district in one project in Northwest Brandenburg, which is definitely what they call a precarious housing area, and these people are unemployed, and they have time for doing this for one reason. They really want to have an improved situation about how the housing area is managed in their district. They think about, I think, in the morning before they come to a meeting with us, is it worth to do this? And it is valuable for them to do it because they have the feeling this is maybe one rare opportunity that people listen to our group of 10 women in this housing area about how really a place can be improved. Not be improved by having some abstract program coming from the city council, but by asking questions about what makes a place better. And if an urgency is so urgent, then there's time. If we come come with our problems or focuses or biases into the project, then maybe there may be no time, or it may be also ethical questions if we ask them to give in time. And I think that's part of the reality of our project, that it reflects like a mirror the unfairness or the biases or whatever we have in society, and that we have to react as mediators to it.
You want to comment? You want to comment, Judith, on that?
No, I think this was a comment, or should I? No.
No, I think that this is what Gary just said. It's this we promise. Mm-hmm. We promise. This is what Sonia basically was talking about. This is what Masha, you were talking about, that there is this intrinsic
motivation.
And I think this is there, the we promise. That we can, so that people have the need to be part of a community, that they need to, you know, someone who has a perfectly organized life will, and don't have time, maybe after 10 years, will see that this is not enough and will still come. But I think this is where we can, in this model, we see this we promise. But when you do the research, how strong is this we promise according to your research in the field?
It depends on the projects, and the projects who work, the we promise is strong, the people believe in it, and there are a lot of practices where they see that this is not only a promise, but it's a fact. Yeah? And if there is, the we promise is here, but it's not proved, then a lot of people go away, leave it. They see it's just a promise. Mm-hmm. But at first you need this promise. Mm-hmm.
So, who wants to have the last word? Maybe we leave it to you, Judith.
Thanks a lot.
You don't want to say anything?
No. So a last word. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
so,
you can tell us what shall we do tomorrow? What is important to put on our guidelines? Yeah, and this will be then we are done.
What is important to put? So to discuss maybe from your specific projects, because every one of you has a big experience in projects, how the people who participate are positioned in the social space. I think this would be interesting. Who are the people who really participate? So who are able to spend time to do it. So, but with reference to your projects, to your practical experience. Mm-hmm. Because I think this is the crucial issue. Who participates? What are the reasons for participation in such projects? How can I, bring people in action? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.